What happens when a powerful millionaire CEO, known for being cold, untouchable, and impossible to work with, meets a young woman who refuses to follow the rules? For years, no secretary at Hayes and Grant. Consulting lasted more than a few days under Nathaniel Hayes's iron grip. Deadlines were merciless, mistakes unforgivable, and emotions entirely unwelcome. Then Emma Carter walked through his glass doors late, clumsy, and absolutely unqualified. She should have been dismissed on the spot. Instead, her blunt honesty and chaotic courage began unraveling everything Nathaniel thought he knew about control. But can one woman's warmth really melt the walls a man has built his whole life? Or will fear, pride, and the heavy shadow of reputation destroy them both before love ever has a chance? This is not just an office romance. It's a story about power and vulnerability, betrayal and redemption, and the strange, beautiful ways two broken people can help each other heal. So, stay with us, because you're about to discover how sometimes the right kind of chaos can change a life forever. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss another story that shines light on the human heart. No secretary lasted more than 5 days working for Nathaniel Hayes, the millionaire CEO of Hayes and Grant Consulting. 5 days, that was the silent record every new assistant failed to beat. Some left in tears, some left in anger, and a few never came back after lunch on their very first day. The man was brilliant, wealthy, and respected across Chicago's high-rises, but to his employees, he was a storm wrapped in a tailored suit, until Emma Carter walked in. Emma wasn't the type of woman you'd expect to challenge someone like Nathaniel Hayes. She wasn't polished like the candidates who came before her, with their perfect resumes and Ivy League smiles. Emma was 28, born in a small town outside Milwaukee, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a diner. Her life had been anything but glamorous. She carried herself with quiet determination, but also a touch of clumsiness that seemed to follow her wherever she went. That Monday morning in late October, Emma was already running 10 minutes late. The Chicago wind had turned her umbrella inside out. Her skirt had twisted sideways as she hurried across the busy street, and her old leather bag kept slipping from her shoulder. By the time she reached the gleaming glass tower of Hayes and Grant, a piece of yesterday's newspaper had stuck to her shoe. Inside the marble lobby, the receptionist, Linda, glanced up, her expression somewhere between pity and amusement. "Interview," Linda asked, sipping her coffee. Emma caught her breath. Yes, Emma Carter. For the executive assistant position. She tried to straighten her blouse, which had wrinkled during the bus ride. Linda tapped her pen against the desk. "You're late, Mr. Hayes doesn't tolerate lateness." Emma smiled an unshaken, almost mischievous smile. "Well, I don't tolerate faulty bus routes. Guess we'll have to forgive each other." The receptionist blinked. Few people dared joke about Nathaniel Hayes, much less in the lobby of his empire. Yet there was something in Emma's tone, calm, lightly humorous, that made Linda hesitate before picking up the phone to announce her arrival. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like stepping into another world. Emma glanced at her reflection in the mirrored walls, brown hair in a loose bun, eyes wide with nerves, but also with something else resolve. She whispered to herself, "It's just a job interview. Worst case, I get rejected. Best case, who knows?" When the elevator doors opened, she walked into a space that looked more like an art museum than an office. Sleek leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of Lake Michigan, and a silence so sharp she could hear the tick of the expensive wall clock. At the end of the corridor, double glass doors opened into the corner office where Nathaniel Hayes was waiting. He sat behind a massive oak desk, his dark suit impeccable, his tie perfectly straight, his eyes, cold and sharp, flicked up from a folder as she entered. Emma took a deep breath. "Don't trip, don't stutter, and for heaven's sake, don't let him see you're nervous." "You're late," Nathaniel said flatly, not bothering to stand. His voice was deep, clipped, the kind of voice used to commanding boardrooms. Yes, Emma admitted without hesitation. The bus broke down, and then I got lost between Michigan Avenue and Wabash, but on the bright side, I didn't spill coffee on my resume, at least not today. For a moment, Nathaniel simply stared at her. Most candidates would have offered 100 excuses, fumbling apologies, but this woman looked him straight in the eye, her tone steady, almost playful. He leaned back slightly. Your resume is incomplete. No degree, inconsistent work history. You're not qualified. Emma clasped her hands together and shrugged. Maybe not on paper, but I'm resourceful. I learn fast, and I don't scare easily. Besides, you've burned through more secretaries in the past year than most people go through umbrellas in a Chicago winter. Doesn't that tell you something? Maybe the problem isn't the secretaries. The corner of Nathaniel's mouth twitched the faintest ghost of surprise. No one had ever spoken to him like that in an interview. Silence stretched across the office, broken only by the hum of the city outside the glass. Finally, Nathaniel closed the folder and set it aside. 1 week, he said. That's all you'll get. Start tomorrow, 8 o'clock sharp. 7:59, Emma corrected lightly, just to keep you on your toes. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes, but she could see the tiniest spark of intrigue behind them. As Emma left the office, adjusting her skirt and finally peeling the newspaper from her shoe, whispers floated from the nearby break room. A group of employees had watched her walk in. How long do you think she'll last? One whispered. A week, maybe less. Another replied, nobody survives Hayes. But Nathaniel Hayes, alone in his office, tapped a pen against his desk and thought about the woman who had just walked out. Emma Carter, bold, clumsy, defiant. Something about her unsettled him, and for the first time in years, he felt the faintest crack in the fortress he had built around himself. Emma Carter had faced her share of uncomfortable mornings, but this one ranked near the top. She had woken up before dawn to iron her only professional skirt, the one she saved for job interviews. Yet somehow, by the time she stepped into the lobby of Hayes and Grant Consulting, a loose thread had unraveled along the seam, leaving her to tug at it nervously like a child pulling at a loose sweater. Her hair, too, had betrayed her. Chicago's lake wind was merciless. The bun she had pinned so carefully now sagged unevenly, stray strands clinging to her cheeks. She caught her reflection in the marble wall and sighed. Great. I look like I lost a fight with the wind, she muttered. Linda, the receptionist, arched an eyebrow as Emma fumbled with her bag strap. You're late, Mr. Hayes doesn't like late. Emma, still catching her breath, offered a crooked smile. And I don't like buses that break down in the middle of Michigan Avenue. Seems we'll both have to live with disappointment. Linda stared for a moment, then shook her head and pressed a button on the desk phone. Mr. Hayes, the candidate is here. 5 minutes later, Emma stood outside the double-glass doors of Nathaniel Hayes's office. She inhaled deeply, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and whispered, just don't trip. Whatever you do, don't trip. She pushed the door open and nearly tripped on the rug anyway, catching herself at the last second. She straightened and forced a smile. Nathaniel Hayes looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. Every detail about him seemed precise. Controlled the crisp navy suit, the neatly combed dark hair, the fountain pen aligned perfectly with the folder in front of him. His gray eyes were steady, cool as winter steel. You're late, he said. I know, Emma admitted quickly. The bus broke down, and then I got lost between Wabash and Michigan. But I made it. That's got to count for something. Nathaniel didn't smile. It counts against you. Time is the one thing we don't recover. Emma nodded slowly. True. But wasting time scolding me for it won't bring it back either. The remark hung in the air like a spark. Most candidates would have apologized endlessly. Emma's honesty, blunt but calm, was disarming. Nathaniel gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Sit. Emma lowered herself into the chair, crossing her legs carefully so the skirt wouldn't reveal its imperfect seam. She folded her hands in her lap, trying to project the image of someone at ease, though her heart raced. Nathaniel opened the folder. Your resume is unconventional. 2 semesters of community college, no degree, a string of jobs waitressing, temp clerical work, retail. None lasted more than a year. Emma leaned forward. That's true. Life had other plans. My mother got sick, so I left school to work. Bills needed paying, but every job taught me something: patience, problem solving, how to deal with difficult people, especially the difficult people. She tilted her head toward him with the faintest grin. For the first time, Nathaniel looked directly at her, studying her face. No fear, no flattery, just directness. You realize this position requires precision, he said. My last assistant lasted 3 days. She left in tears. Emma nodded. Sounds like she wasn't the right fit. Or maybe you weren't. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. You're implying I'm just saying? Emma interrupted softly. If no secretary lasts more than 5 days, maybe the problem isn't them. Silence fell again, thicker this time. Outside, the hum of traffic 32 floors below seemed very far away. Nathaniel set the folder aside and steepled his fingers. Tell me, Miss Carter, why should I hire someone with no degree, no long-term employment record, and no proof she can handle this job? Emma straightened. Because I'm still here? Despite the thread in my skirt, despite the bus, despite walking into a room where I know you've already decided I'm unqualified, I'm still here. That's resilience. And resilience is worth more than a perfect resume. Nathaniel tapped his pen once against the desk. He was intrigued, though he wouldn't admit it. Something about her unsettled his tidy world. Finally, he leaned back. 1 week? You'll start tomorrow at 8 o'clock sharp. If you survive, we'll talk again. Emma's lips curved into a small, triumphant smile. 7:59. Just to keep you guessing. His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. As Emma stood to leave, she smoothed her skirt, glanced at the skyline through the tall windows, and allowed herself a quiet exhale of relief. Behind her, Nathaniel Hayes remained seated, staring at the closed door long after she was gone. He told himself she wouldn't last. No one ever did. But something about Emma Carter lingered in his thoughts. Not her resume, not her appearance. It was the way she had looked at him, not intimidated, not desperate, but steady. And Nathaniel Hayes, who prided himself on never letting anyone get under his skin, realized he was already curious. Emma Carter's first official morning at Hayes and Grant began with the kind of silence that made her stomach knot. The 32nd floor was a world of glass and chrome, the kind of place where shoes clicked against polished floors and people whispered in the corners instead of laughing out loud. Every desk she passed seemed guarded by serious faces, eyes glued to screens. But the moment she sat down at the small station outside Nathaniel Hayes' office, the assistant's trench, as one employee had called it, she felt the weight of stares from across the room. Some were curious, others skeptical, a few openly dismissive. It didn't help that she nearly knocked over the phone on her desk while trying to log into the system, or that the chair squeaked loudly every time she shifted. Emma told herself to breathe. Just get through the day. Don't let them see you rattled. At exactly 8:15, the office doors swung open. Nathaniel stepped out, tall and composed, his suit pressed to perfection. The room seemed to freeze. Conversations halted. Emma glanced up, startled, a stack of disorganized files in her hands. "What are you doing?" Nathaniel's voice cut like a blade. Emma blinked. "Organizing." These files were scattered everywhere, so I made a system. Green folders for urgent, yellow for important, blue for, well, things that could wait until the end of time. Nathaniel's expression didn't change. There is already a system. It has worked for 5 years. Emma tilted her head. unbothered. Then now you have two systems. A little competition never hurt anyone. For 3 long seconds, Nathaniel just stared at her, his jaw tightening. Then, without a word, he turned and walked back into his office, closing the door with deliberate force. From across the room, Emma caught the faintest smirk from one of the analysts, quickly hidden behind a coffee cup. Whispers spread like wildfire. "She won't last 3 days," someone murmured. "She talked back already," another said in disbelief. Emma pretended not to hear, though her stomach tightened. Still, she returned to her color-coded chaos with quiet determination. By mid-morning, the phone on her desk rang. She nearly dropped the receiver, but managed to answer brightly. "Hayes and Grant Consulting. This is Emma Carter. How can I help make your day a little easier?" There was silence on the other end, then a clipped voice. "This is Robert Whitman, from Whitman Financial. I usually speak directly with Mr. Hayes." Emma scrambled, flipping through the calendar. "Of course. Mr. Whitman, I see you're scheduled for Thursday at 10. Would you like me to confirm that I'm calling about an urgent clause in the Detroit contract?" He said, impatient. "Right. Urgent clause. Got it. Please hold while I transfer you." She pressed 3 random buttons, praying one of them was correct. Instead, the line went dead. Emma winced. Moments later, Nathaniel's door flew open. "You sent Whitman to Human Resources," he said sharply. Emma bit her lip. "Well, in my defense, this phone has more buttons than an airplane cockpit. Whitman is our largest client. He does not belong in Human Resources." Emma grabbed a notepad and scribbled furiously. "Whitman, all important. HR, no go." She looked up at Nathaniel. "Okay, but why did he sound nervous? Contracts usually don't make people sweat." Nathaniel hesitated, his eyes narrowing. He didn't like how quickly she had noticed. "That is not your concern." Before she could reply, he turned away, folder in hand. But Emma noticed the faintest crease at the corner of his mouth, the telltale sign of worry. The rest of the day was a blur of small mistakes. She spilled water on her notepad, printed the wrong report, and at one point accidentally sat in Nathaniel's chair while waiting for him, muttering about how bad it was for posture. Each misstep earned her a glare that could have frozen the lake outside. And yet, there were moments. When a courier delivered a package labeled confidential, Emma signed for it without hesitation. Nathaniel later discovered her signature had inadvertently revealed a loophole that saved the firm millions. She didn't even understand how she had just signed her name on the wrong line. Nathaniel studied her in disbelief. 3 of our attorneys missed this. You uncovered it by accident." Emma shrugged. "What can I say? Sometimes chaos does the job." That night, as the office emptied and the city lights shimmered against the glass, Nathaniel remained at his desk, reviewing the contract she had fixed. His pen hovered over the page, but his thoughts drifted. He thought about her calm defiance that morning, the way she had looked at him, not as if he were a man to fear, but as if he were just a man. It unsettled him. He had built his life on control, order, distance. But Emma Carter, with her messy bun and her stubborn honesty, was cracking the edges of that armor, and Nathaniel Hayes wasn't sure whether he wanted to stop her. By the 3rd week, Emma Carter had grown used to the skeptical glances. The analyst whispered near the coffee machine. The assistants from other floors shared looks when she walked into the elevator. She knew what they were thinking. She won't last. She's just another temporary mistake in Mr. Hayes's long line of discarded assistants. Emma tried to shrug it off. She focused on her color-coded files, her awkwardly cheerful phone greetings, and her daily battle with the copier that seemed to resent her very existence. But that Tuesday morning, something shifted. Nathaniel called her into his office with a tone sharper than usual. On his desk lay a thick folder stamped confidential. Detroit expansion contract. "Sit," he said. Emma obeyed, balancing her notebook on her lap. "This contract is falling apart," Nathaniel explained, flipping through the pages. "Whitman Financial is threatening to withdraw. A single clause in Section 12 contradicts state regulations, and their lawyers are using it as leverage to renegotiate the entire deal. If this falls through, Hayes and Grant loses not only millions, but credibility. Understand? Emma nodded, though her mind was racing. Why is he telling me this? I barely figured out the phone system last week. Your task, Nathaniel continued, is simple. Do nothing. Stay out of it. I'll handle this with the legal team. He handed her a stack of scheduling requests and waved her off. But Emma couldn't help herself. Later that afternoon, when Nathaniel left for a meeting, she found the Detroit file still on his desk. She only meant to straighten the pages, yet curiosity tugged at her. She sat down, scanning the dense legal language. Most of it looked like another language entirely. But something odd caught her eye, a signature line near the bottom of Section 12, labeled Acknowledgement of Contingency. Her brow furrowed. That's not where signatures usually go, she muttered. On instinct, she compared it to other contracts in the stack. Each one had signatures aligned at the end, never mid-clause. But here, the placement created a subtle shift in meaning. By signing in that spot, the contingency effectively became null. Emma grabbed her pen and scribbled notes furiously. If this clause is acknowledged early, it voids the renegotiation leverage. Her heart pounded. Could it be that simple? When Nathaniel returned, she blurted it out before he could even sit down. Section 12 doesn't hold up if you sign on the acknowledgement line. It flips the burden back to Whitman. Nathaniel froze mid-step. What did you just say? Emma swallowed. I was just tidying up your file. I noticed the placement. If the company signs there, Whitman can't use the regulation as leverage. At least, that's how I read it. Nathaniel snatched the folder, scanning the pages with intensity. His eyes darted back and forth, his jaw tightening. Finally, he looked at her not with disdain this time, but with something far rarer astonishment. Do you have any idea what you've uncovered? He asked, his voice low. Emma shook her head. This is what our legal team has been chasing for 6 weeks. You just spotted it in an afternoon. Her cheeks flushed. I wasn't trying to. You just saved this firm $10 million. The weight of his words hit the air like a hammer. Emma sat frozen, her notebook sliding off her lap. Nathaniel paced behind his desk, running a hand through his neatly combed hair, something Emma had never seen him do. 3 senior attorneys missed this. And you, without a law degree, without training. He stopped, his gaze piercing. How? Emma shrugged helplessly. I read everything, even the fine print on cereal boxes. My brain just catches weird details. Silence stretched between them. Then, almost against his nature, Nathaniel allowed the corner of his mouth to twitch upward. Carter, you may be chaos, but apparently you're useful chaos. The next morning, the Detroit contract was salvaged. Hayes and Grant announced to the client that Whitman's objections were void. The firm's reputation was not only restored, but bolstered. By noon, the entire office was buzzing. At the copier, 2 analysts whispered, she caught the loophole. That can't be true. She's just his assistant. Near the break room, Jennifer from marketing smirked knowingly. Mark my words. No assistant gets that close to Hayes without other reasons. Emma overheard, pretending to focus on stapling her papers. But the sting lodged deep. Meanwhile, Nathaniel watched from his office window, pen twirling in his hand. He had told himself Emma was a temporary inconvenience, a distraction at best, a liability at worst. But now she had done what he, his lawyers, and his entire staff could not. That evening, as most employees filtered out, Emma gathered her things, exhaustion heavy in her bones. She paused at the glass wall, glancing into Nathaniel's office. He was still at his desk, the glow of the lamp casting sharp angles across his face. For the first time, she thought she saw something fragile beneath the ice, something almost human. But she shook her head. Don't get attached. He's still the man who sees you as temporary. Nathaniel, however, sat long after the lights dimmed. Alone in his office, he whispered into the silence, almost as if testing the words on his tongue. Emma Carter. It was the first time her name carried weight in his mind, and he wasn't sure he wanted to let it go. Emma Carter had been working at Hayes and Grant just long enough to know that mornings set the tone of the day. Nathaniel arrived at precisely 8 o'clock, his schedule already packed, his demeanor set in stone. He was predictable, efficient, mechanical. So, one Friday morning, Emma decided to disrupt his routine. She stopped by a small cafe on her way in, balancing 2 paper cups as she stepped into the building. The receptionist raised an eyebrow as Emma passed, but she only smiled. Her desk was already stacked with folders, but she carried the coffee straight into Nathaniel's office, unannounced. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said brightly. "I brought coffee. One for you, one for me." Nathaniel looked up from a report, his pen frozen mid-sentence. His gaze dropped to the cup she placed on his desk, its cardboard sleeve decorated with a doodle of a sun the barista had drawn. "I didn't ask for coffee," he said flatly. "I know," Emma replied, settling into the chair across from him. "That's why it's a surprise. Yours is a latte, 2 sugars, a little vanilla. Trust me, it'll change your life." He regarded the cup like it was an alien object. "I drink my coffee black." Emma sipped her own, letting the cinnamon and cream coat her tongue. Everyone drinks it black until they try something better. Nathaniel picked up the cup, sniffed it cautiously, and took a small sip. His face tightened as though he'd swallowed syrup. "This is far too sweet." "You mean far too delicious." "No," he said firmly, setting it down. "Too sweet, overpowering. It tastes like a dessert pretending to be coffee." Emma laughed softly. "You sound like someone who's allergic to happiness." His brow arched. "It's not about happiness. It's about efficiency. Black coffee delivers what I need: energy, focus, no distractions." Emma leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "So, your whole life is efficiency. No distractions, no flavor, no joy." The room went still. Nathaniel's jaw flexed. "That routine has built this company. Discipline is what keeps everything together. Or what keeps everyone out," Emma countered, her tone sharper now. "You've built a fortress, Mr. Hayes. High walls, locked gates. No one gets in, not even over a cup of coffee." His eyes flashed, and for the first time, she saw something unsettled beneath the surface. "You've been here less than a month. Carter. And you think you can diagnose my life?" Emma didn't flinch. "I don't need a month to see loneliness. You sit behind that desk every day. You push people away with that icy tone. And I bet when you go home at night, it's just you and the financial news for company." The silence that followed was so heavy it pressed against Emma's chest. Nathaniel rose from his chair slowly, placing his hands flat on the desk between them. "You presume much. I observe much," Emma corrected, her voice softer now. "You're not a robot, Nathaniel, but you're trying awfully hard to be one." For a moment, their eyes locked. Emma's heart pounded, her defiance warring with something else, something like pity. She saw him clearly, not just the sharp edges, but the hollow space beneath them. And Nathaniel, he felt exposed in a way he hadn't in years. Emma's words had peeled back layers he thought were untouchable. A stranger had walked straight through his defenses with nothing but honesty. He hated it, and yet he couldn't deny the strange relief of being seen. Emma finally leaned back, breaking the tension. She let out a shaky laugh. "You know, all this over a cup of coffee. Who knew caffeine could be so philosophical?" Nathaniel remained standing, his expression guarded again, though his pulse still hammered in his throat. "Stick to your tasks, Carter. Leave my life out of your analysis." "Fine," she said, rising from the chair and gathering her cup. But before leaving, she turned at the door. For the record, the latte was better. The door clicked shut behind her, and Nathaniel sank into his chair, pressing his fingertips to his temples. He should have been angry. He should have considered firing her on the spot. Instead, all he could hear was her voice echoing, "You've built a fortress. High walls, locked gates. Emma returned to her desk, her heart still racing. Part of her was angry. How could a man live so rigidly, refusing kindness as if it were poison? But another part ached. She'd seen a flicker of something in his eyes, a loneliness so raw it unsettled her. She muttered to herself, "What a stubborn, impossible man." Then, quieter, but maybe not impossible. Meanwhile, inside his office, Nathaniel stared at the untouched latte, the doodled sun smiling up at him. He hated the sweetness, but he couldn't bring himself to throw it away. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Hayes felt the fortress shake, and that frightened him more than failure ever could. The end-of-year gala at Hayes and Grant was the kind of event that made Emma Carter want to crawl back into her tiny apartment and hide under a blanket. The invitation had arrived on company letterhead, formal attire required, attendance mandatory, mandatory. She sighed as she zipped herself into the only formal dress she could afford from a rental boutique, a red gown that clung in all the places she wasn't used to and shimmered under the light. It felt too bold, too loud, but the saleswoman had said, "You'll stand out in the best way," and Emma, against her better judgment, had believed her. The hotel ballroom gleamed with chandeliers, polished marble, and an orchestra playing soft classical music. Employees mingled in gowns and tuxedos, their conversations polite, controlled, and tinged with rivalry. When Emma walked in, the sea of muted blacks and grays seemed to part. Heads turned, conversations paused. She caught more than one raised eyebrow. She muttered under her breath, "Fantastic. I look like a stop sign at a funeral." She tried to make herself small, gravitating toward the refreshment table, but fate, as usual, had other plans. As she reached for a glass of champagne, her heel caught on the hem of her gown. The tray the waiter was carrying wobbled, and before she could stop herself, 6 crystal glasses toppled in a glittering arc straight toward the group of investors Nathaniel Hayes was speaking with. The crash was deafening. Champagne splattered across the marble floor, droplets landing dangerously close to Nathaniel's polished shoes. The room fell into complete silence. Emma froze, her face burning redder than her dress. I'm so sorry." She braced herself for the explosion for Nathaniel to glare, to cut her down with that icy tone in front of everyone. Instead, he exhaled slowly and stepped forward. His voice, calm but firm, broke the silence. "Are you hurt?" Emma blinked. "What did you cut yourself on the glass?" His eyes searched hers, steady, protective. She shook her head. "No, I don't think so." Nathaniel turned to the waiter, signaling him to clean up quickly. Then, without hesitation, he placed a hand on Emma's back and guided her through the stairs, out the side doors, and onto a quiet balcony overlooking the city lights. The cold air rushed around them, carrying away the heavy silence. Emma leaned against the railing, mortified. "Well, I just single-handedly embarrassed you in front of half the financial district." Nathaniel adjusted his cufflinks, his face unreadable. It was an accident. Accidents happen. She looked at him in disbelief. That's it. No lecture on efficiency, no speech about discipline. His eyes softened ever so slightly. Not everything needs to be a lesson. Carter. For a moment, neither spoke. The muffled music drifted from the ballroom, and the city stretched before them in glittering silence. Emma glanced sideways at him. "You hate these events, don't you?" His jaw tightened. "They're obligations. My mother always said appearances were everything. When I was a boy, she hosted elaborate parties not for me, but to impress her circle. I wore suits before I knew how to ride a bike. I shook hands with adults who didn't care who I was. Birthdays, holidays, all orchestrated for reputation." Emma's chest ached, so even celebrations weren't really yours. He looked out over the skyline, his voice quieter now. They felt like performances. "I learned early that vulnerability was a liability, and appearances kept people satisfied." Emma studied him, seeing the rigid posture, the weight he carried like armor. For once, The ice didn't feel cold, it felt brittle, like glass ready to crack. "You know," she said softly, "a real birthday party should be pizza, bad music, too much frosting on the cake, and people laughing until their stomachs hurt. Not whatever your mother staged." Nathaniel gave a short, humorless laugh. "That sounds chaotic. That sounds human," Emma corrected. The words lingered between them. Nathaniel turned, meeting her eyes, and for the first time, she saw not the CEO, not the fortress of discipline, but a man who had never been allowed to simply be himself. Emma's heart tightened. She felt her usual frustration with him melting into something more complicated, a blend of anger at the coldness he had endured and compassion for the loneliness still etched into him. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked gently. He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the ground before returning to her. "Because somehow, you keep asking the questions no one else dares. And worse, I keep wanting to answer them." Emma didn't know what to say. She simply stood there, the winter wind tugging at her hair, wishing she could take away the years of isolation he had worn like a second skin. For Nathaniel, the moment was terrifying. To speak of his past, to admit to emptiness, felt like standing unarmed in a battlefield. And yet, with Emma beside him, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt necessary. The door opened behind them, laughter spilling onto the balcony. Nathaniel straightened instantly, his mask sliding back into place. "We should return," he said briskly. Emma nodded, though a part of her wished they could stay out there forever. She followed him back inside, back into the performance. But as the night wore on, Emma couldn't shake the memory of his voice on the balcony low, vulnerable, human. And Nathaniel, though he never glanced her way in public, carried the same memory like a dangerous secret. For the first time in years, he wondered what it might feel like to let someone pass the walls. Monday morning carried a weight Emma couldn't quite place. The office buzzed with its usual rhythm, phones ringing, printers humming, but Nathaniel Hayes seemed unusually distracted. He checked his phone more often than usual, sighed more heavily, and, for once, wasn't correcting her filing system. At 9:30 sharp, the phone on Emma's desk lit up. The caller ID made her blink Margaret Hayes. She hesitated. His mother. Should I even? The door to his office opened. Nathaniel's voice was calm, but there was tension in it. "Take it." Emma picked up the receiver. Hayes and Grant, Emma Carter, speaking. "Emma?" The voice on the other end was polished, commanding, and cool. "This is Margaret Hayes. May I speak to my son?" Emma nearly dropped the phone. "Of course. Mrs. Hayes. One moment, please." She transferred the call with careful precision this time. A beat later, she heard Nathaniel's tone shift completely. "Hello? Mother?" She couldn't help but listen, the words filtering through the partially open door. "I'll be arriving Thursday," Margaret declared. "Lunch Friday at the plaza. You'll join me and Caroline Whitmore." There was a pause. Emma could almost picture Nathaniel's jaw tightening. "Mother? I told you Caroline is a Harvard-trained attorney with a spotless reputation. She comes from an excellent family. You two will be perfect together." "Mother." "No arguments. Nathaniel, 1 o'clock sharp. Do not embarrass me." Emma pretended to shuffle papers, but she heard the silence stretching inside his office. Then Nathaniel's voice cool, deliberate, but with an undercurrent of panic. "I can't attend. Mother, I already have plans. With someone." The air seemed to crackle. "Someone." "Since when recently?" Nathaniel replied. "Her name is Emma." Emma's heart stopped. There was silence on the line before Margaret spoke again, clipped and suspicious. "Emma. And what does Emma do?" "She's intelligent. Thoughtful." Nathaniel said smoothly. "She works with me." Emma nearly knocked over her stapler. What on earth is he doing? "Then I expect to meet her." "Friday," Margaret declared. "The plaza, 1 o'clock, no excuses." The line clicked dead. Emma stood frozen behind her desk as Nathaniel stepped out of his office. He didn't look at her right away. "You," she sputtered. "You just—" "I panicked," he admitted quickly, his voice low so the rest of the office wouldn't hear. "She was pushing Caroline Whitmore at me. I had to stop it." Emma gaped. "So you volunteered me as your fake girlfriend? To your mother, without asking?" Nathaniel finally met her eyes. "Yes." Emma's jaw dropped. "Nathaniel Hayes, you are unbelievable." "I'll compensate you," he said. As if money could patch over the absurdity, she crossed her arms. "This isn't a contract you can buy your way out of. Do you have any idea what you've put me into? Your mother already thinks I'm some kind of interloper." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Carter, I know this is insane, but if you help me, just for one afternoon, I'll make it worth your while." She stared at him, torn between fury and disbelief. Why me? Something flickered in his eyes. Hesitation, maybe honesty. "Because she'll believe it with you." Emma felt her chest tighten. The words landed heavier than they should have. Friday arrived too quickly. Emma stood in front of the Plaza Hotel's grand entrance, wearing the only dress that seemed conservative enough, a navy blue borrowed from her neighbor. Her stomach twisted. Nathaniel appeared beside her, immaculate in his tailored suit, ready. Emma gave him a look, not remotely inside. Margaret Hayes was already waiting at a window table. Her posture was perfect, pearls gleaming, hair styled into a silver crown. Her eyes sharpened when she saw Emma. "Mother?" Nathaniel greeted, kissing her cheek. "This is Emma." Emma extended her hand. "Mrs. Hayes." "It's a pleasure." Margaret shook it lightly, her eyes assessing every detail Emma's borrowed dress, her simple shoes, the nervous way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "So," Margaret said coolly once they sat, "you're Emma. And what exactly do you do?" Emma's throat tightened. She could feel Nathaniel's gaze on her, steady, expectant. "I work in strategy." She managed contract analysis, mostly. Margaret's brow arched. "Interesting. And your education?" Emma swallowed. "I studied business administration. I didn't finish my degree. Life took me in another direction." The air stiffened. Margaret's lips pressed into a line. "I see." Emma forced herself to smile. "But I've learned more on the job than I ever did in class. Experience has a way of teaching what textbooks can't." Nathaniel nodded slightly, backing her up. "She's being modest. Emma saved a multi-million-dollar deal last month." Margaret's eyes flicked between them, assessing, calculating. As the meal went on, Emma did her best to stay calm, to answer questions honestly without giving too much away. But inside, her thoughts tangled. "This is wrong. I shouldn't be here, pretending. It's a lie." And yet, every time Nathaniel glanced at her, steady and deliberate, she felt her chest tighten. Was it only a performance, or was something real bleeding through? She hated herself for wondering. When the lunch ended, Margaret shook Emma's hand again, warmer this time. "You're different," she said, almost thoughtfully. "I'll be watching with interest." As they left, Emma exhaled sharply. "Well, that was torture." Nathaniel walked beside her, his tone quiet. "You were remarkable." Emma turned on him. Don't you dare make this sound like a compliment. You dragged me into a lie. Nathaniel, and the worst part," she paused, her voice catching. "The worst part is, I'm afraid I'm starting to believe it myself." Nathaniel stopped walking, his expression unreadable. For a second, he looked as though he might say something that mattered. But instead, he straightened his cufflinks, the mask sliding back into place. "Thank you for helping me, Carter." Emma walked ahead, her pulse loud in her ears. Inside, she was at war, furious at him for crossing a line, furious at herself for wanting it to be true. The Monday after the Plaza lunch felt like walking into a pressure cooker. Emma Carter knew the entire floor had heard whispers. Margaret Hayes had been seen with her at the hotel, and that alone was enough to fuel a week's worth of gossip. She kept her head down, focusing on her inbox, but the stares followed her like shadows. It wasn't until Nathaniel called her into the conference room that she realized her day was about to become far more complicated. Spread across the long oak table were mock-ups, charts, and draft proposals for Sterling & Co., a luxury home goods brand considering Hayes and Grant for a national marketing campaign. It was the kind of account that could shape the firm's future for years. Nathaniel's voice was clipped as usual. The Sterling board meets Wednesday. Their executives are unimpressed with our current pitch. If we fail, they'll walk. The team of analysts shifted uncomfortably. They had worked on the campaign for weeks, and hearing Nathaniel's blunt verdict stung. Emma, standing awkwardly at the back with her notepad, raised her hand as though she were in a classroom. "Can I say something?" Nathaniel gave her a sharp look. "This is not your area." "Carter." She hesitated. "Maybe not. But as someone who's definitely in Sterling's target market, I can tell you what doesn't excite me about this campaign. It's sterile. It's polished. Yes, but it doesn't feel like anything. You're selling couches and lamps, but people don't buy couches. They buy Sunday afternoons with their kids on those couches. They don't buy lamps. They buy the comfort of light when the world feels dark." The room went silent. Emma flushed. "Sorry. I'll sit down now." But Nathaniel's gaze lingered on her, thoughtful. "Go on," he said quietly, encouraged. Emma straightened. Sterling should sell the stories behind their products. Show a grandmother reading to her granddaughter under that lamp. A couple celebrating their first home, dancing in the living room with those couches in the background. People remember feelings more than furniture. One of the analysts scoffed under his breath, but Sterling's representative, who had been sitting stiffly at the far end of the table, suddenly leaned forward. "That's exactly the kind of angle we've been waiting for. Emotional connection, authenticity." All eyes turned to Emma. She swallowed hard, her palms sweating. Nathaniel cleared his throat. "Prepare a revised pitch using Carter's angle." Meeting adjourned. The analysts shuffled out, some glaring, others whispering. Emma remained rooted to the spot, stunned. Nathaniel approached her, his expression unreadable. "That was reckless," he said. She bristled. "I was just being honest." "Reckless," he repeated. Then, after a pause, but effective, 2 days later, Emma sat in the back of the Sterling boardroom, her heart pounding. The revised presentation had been polished by the analysts, but the core was hers. When the final slide ended with a simple image of a family gathered in a warmly lit living room, the Sterling executives applauded. "This," one of them said, "is exactly why we'll be staying with Hayes and Grant." Emma exhaled, almost dizzy with relief. Back at the office, word spread like wildfire. Emma Carter, the assistant, had saved the Sterling contract again. That afternoon, Robert Grant, the co-founder of the firm, stopped by Nathaniel's office. His booming voice carried down the hall. "Hayes, we can't ignore it. Promote her, at least temporarily. She's earned it." Minutes later, Nathaniel called Emma inside. She perched on the edge of the chair, nerves buzzing. "You're being named Interim Creative Strategy Associate," he announced. "It's not permanent yet, but you'll attend executive meetings and contribute ideas." Emma blinked. That's a real title. It's also a real risk." Nathaniel replied, "Don't squander it." She wanted to laugh, cry, and scream all at once. Instead, she nodded. "I won't." The promotion, however, came with invisible strings. By the next morning, the office felt colder. Evelyn from marketing gave Emma a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. 2 assistants whispered near the elevator, cutting off mid-sentence when Emma approached. At lunch, she overheard one of them hiss, "She's sleeping her way up." "Has to be. Nobody gets that close to Hayes otherwise." Emma's stomach turned. She pushed her salad away, appetite gone. That night, sitting alone at her small kitchen table, she let the weight of it sink in. She'd worked hard, offered an idea from her heart, and now, Half the company believed she was just a pawn in some secret affair. She dropped her head into her hands. Why does it feel like every victory comes with a punishment? Yet, beneath the frustration, something more dangerous stirred the memory of Nathaniel's voice in the conference room, backing her up without hesitation. The way his eyes had softened, just slightly, when she spoke her truth. It wasn't just business anymore, and that terrified her. Meanwhile, Nathaniel sat in his dark office long after everyone had left. He thought of Emma's words, her instinct for storytelling, her ability to connect dots that others overlooked. She was chaos, yes, but she was also brilliance. For the first time, he wondered if she wasn't just reshaping the company. Maybe, without meaning to, she was reshaping him. The summons came on a gray Tuesday morning. Emma had barely set her coffee on her desk when Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, his face unreadable. "Boardroom, 10 minutes," he said, before disappearing back into his office. Her stomach clenched. Emergency board meetings were never good news. She gathered her notes, her hands trembling slightly, and followed the stream of executives down the hall. The long mahogany table inside the boardroom gleamed under the overhead lights, and every seat was filled. Robert Grant sat at the head, his expression stern. Margaret Hayes had taken a place at the opposite end, pearls glinting, her gaze sharp as a blade. Emma slipped into a chair near the side, trying to steady her breath. She could feel the tension hanging in the air like a storm waiting to break. Robert cleared his throat. "We've called this meeting because concerns have been raised about recent promotions and the firm's reputation." Specifically, his eyes shifted toward Emma, regarding Miss Carter. Emma froze. "Me?" Margaret leaned forward, her voice cool. "Let's not pretend. Robert, the girl has been in this company mere months, yet somehow she's already steering high-profile campaigns, attending executive meetings, and holding influence beyond her station." Whispers rippled around the table. Emma's pulse hammered. "With respect, I was asked to contribute because my ideas saved the Sterling contract. Or so we're told." Margaret cut in smoothly. "But the optics are troubling. A young woman, with no degree, no pedigree, suddenly elevated by my son's favor. What conclusion do you expect people to draw?" Emma's face burned. "That I worked hard, that I proved myself?" One of the older board members leaned back in his chair. "Rumors have spread, Miss Carter, about your relationship with Mr. Hayes." Her heart dropped. She turned instinctively toward Nathaniel, waiting for him to speak, to shut it down, to defend her. But he sat still, his hands folded, his jaw clenched, silent. The air seemed to drain from the room. Emma felt as though the ground had opened beneath her. "You're seriously entertaining gossip," she whispered, her voice breaking. Robert shifted uncomfortably. "Emma, no one is questioning your character." "Yes, they are," she shot back, her voice sharper now. "You're all questioning it, right here in this room, and the one person who knows the truth." Her eyes locked on Nathaniel. "He won't even say it." Nathaniel's eyes flickered, but he remained mute. She saw the fear in him, the calculation, the weight of his mother's presence, the fragile balance of his reputation. And in that silence, Emma's heart cracked. She rose from her chair, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "I won't sit here and be humiliated. I have given this company everything I had. I've worked late. I've fought for clients. I've poured myself into ideas that saved millions. And yet, all you see is a woman you can reduce to a rumor." The room was silent. Even Margaret's eyes narrowed, surprised by the fire in Emma's words. Emma turned, her gaze hard on Nathaniel one last time. "And you let them do it. You let them tear me down to protect yourself." She gathered her bag with shaking hands. "I resign, effective immediately." Gasps filled the room. Robert half rose from his seat. Emma waited, but she was already walking out, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She didn't stop until she reached her desk, where she grabbed her few belongings, her notebook, her mug, the photo of her mother. The whispers followed her all the way to the elevator. The doors closed, and only then did the tears spill down her cheeks. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall, her chest aching. I should have known. I should have known this was too good to be true. She thought of every late night, every moment of triumph, every flicker of connection she had felt with Nathaniel, and now it all felt poisoned, more than the gossip, more than Margaret's disdain. What cut deepest was his silence. He could have said one word. He could have told the truth that nothing inappropriate had happened, that she had earned her place. Instead, he had chosen to protect himself. By the time the elevator reached the ground floor, Emma's sorrow hardened into resolve. She would not beg. She would not crumble. She would leave with her dignity intact, even if it meant starting over from nothing. As she stepped into the cold Chicago air, she whispered to herself, "Never again. I won't let anyone make me feel small for being who I am." Back in the boardroom, the silence after Emma's departure was suffocating. Robert finally turned to Nathaniel. "Why didn't you defend her?" Nathaniel stared at the empty doorway, his throat tight. "Because," his voice faltered, "because if I had, they would have believed the rumors even more." Margaret's lips curved into a satisfied smile. "You did the right thing, Nathaniel. Appearances matter." But as Nathaniel sat there, staring at the chair Emma had vacated, he felt no victory, only a hollow ache spreading through his chest. Her words echoed in his mind. "You let them tear me down to protect yourself." And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Hayes wondered if protecting his reputation had cost him something far more valuable. Nathaniel tries to return to business as usual after Emma's resignation, but the emptiness is impossible to ignore. Her desk is perfectly organized, her files color-coded one last time, as if mocking him with her presence even in absence. He finds himself staring at the empty chair outside his office, unable to focus. Employees whisper about how much colder and harsher he seems, without Emma's energy balancing the atmosphere. By mid-week, cracks begin to show. He snaps at his team, forgets key details in meetings, and even cancels important appointments. Worse still, Robert Grant, the tech magnate whose campaign Emma saved, calls in fury. He demands Emma's involvement, refusing to accept Nathaniel's reassurances. "If Emma Carter isn't part of this project, consider our partnership over," Sterling threatens, his voice sharp with finality. The board panics. Margaret scolds him for allowing a secretary to wield so much influence, but Nathaniel finally sees the truth. Emma was never just a secretary. She was the spark, the one who saw beyond his rigid walls. Without her, the company may survive, but he will not. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel admits to himself that this isn't only about business. It's about her clumsy courage, her stubborn honesty, the way she looked at him as though he were human, not a machine. He remembers the fire in her eyes as she walked out, the pain in her voice when she said he had betrayed her. That memory cuts deeper than any loss of revenue ever could. Determined, Nathaniel begins searching for her. Phone calls go unanswered. Her apartment is empty. Desperate, he questions colleagues until one young intern mentions seeing Emma's social media post about volunteering at an animal rescue farm on the outskirts of Chicago. Without hesitation, Nathaniel drives out there himself, his immaculate suit completely out of place against the muddy roads and wooden barns. He finds her in the most unexpected setting, sitting cross-legged on the ground, her hair pulled back loosely, surrounded by rescued animals. A goat nudges her arm, and a puppy curls in her lap. She's laughing softly, her guard down, more at peace than he has ever seen her. For a moment, he just watches, struck by the contrast between the polished boardrooms where she fought so hard and this quiet place where she seems to belong. But when Emma notices him standing by the fence, her laughter fades instantly. The warmth in her eyes turns cold. She rises slowly, brushing straw from her jeans, and fixes him with a look that could slice him in two. "What are you doing here, Nathaniel?" He grips the bouquet of pale pink peonies he bought on the way. his carefully rehearsed words scattering like leaves in the wind. Instead, he blurts out the truth: I was wrong. About everything. Emma folds her arms, shielding herself. You don't get to show up here and say that. Not after what you did. Nathaniel steps closer, mud splattering his polished shoes. But he doesn't care. I should have defended you. I should have told them you were the best strategist this company has ever seen. Instead, I let fear rule me. Fear of scandal, fear of losing control. And in the process, I lost you. His voice breaks on the last word. Emma shakes her head, her voice trembling with anger. You didn't just lose me, Nathaniel. You betrayed me in front of everyone. You let them humiliate me. The silence that follows is broken by the sound of a piglet snorting and tugging at Nathaniel's tie, as if mocking his desperation. For once, he doesn't shove it away. He kneels down right there in the straw, ruined suit and all, looking up at her with a humility no one has ever seen from him. I don't care about the company right now. I don't care about the contracts, the board, even my mother. None of it matters without you. He swallows hard, his voice raw. Emma, I need you, not just for the firm. For me, you're the only person who's ever made me feel alive. Emma's defenses falter at the sight of this man, the one who once seemed untouchable, kneeling in mud, hay clinging to his shoulders, his eyes pleading. She feels her chest tighten with the memory of what they had shared, of the fragile humanity she glimpsed beneath his armor. Still, she whispers, how can I trust you again? Nathaniel looks at her, the piglet still tugging at his sleeve, and says quietly, because this time I will fight for you in front of everyone. No more silence, no more hiding. You taught me that love and courage mean nothing if you're too afraid to show them. Let me prove I've learned. Emma doesn't answer right away. She watches him struggle to his feet, his suit ruined, his pride abandoned. And though part of her still aches with betrayal, another part sees the sincerity etched in his face. The man she once called a machine is finally, painfully, human. Nathaniel doesn't leave the animal rescue that day. Standing in the straw, his once flawless image in ruins, he knows this is the moment he can't run from anymore. For years, he has hidden behind perfection and control, but now, stripped of both, he speaks plainly. He tells Emma about his fear of weakness, of becoming the disappointment his mother always said he would be, fear that if he admitted his feelings, he'd lose her. He confesses how her honesty terrified him, because it exposed the hollowness of the life he built. Finally, with his voice breaking, he admits the truth he has never told another soul: I love you. Emma. Not the way I love success or order. I love you. With all the mess, the laughter, the stubbornness, the light you bring into rooms I never knew were dark. Emma listens in silence, arms folded, her heart racing. She wants to believe him, but the wound from his betrayal still aches. Her thoughts twist inside her. Can a man who once chose silence over me ever truly change? Or will he retreat again when the world turns cruel? Nathaniel sees the conflict in her eyes. He doesn't beg, doesn't argue. Instead, he simply says, I'll spend the rest of my life proving it, if you let me. Emma feels tears prick her eyes. She takes a step closer, but doesn't release him from responsibility. If I come back, Nathaniel, it won't be because you need me to fix your company. It'll be because you've learned to stand with me. I won't be your secret, your shield, or your rumor. If anyone dares question my worth again, you speak. You fight for me. Do you understand? His answer is immediate, steady. Yes, I promise. Emma, never again will I let silence betray you. For the first time, she sees something different in him, not just desperation, but humility and resolve. The machine-like CEO is gone. Before her stands a flawed man, finally unafraid to show his cracks. Slowly, Emma lowers her arms. The fight drains out of her chest, replaced by something gentler, something she thought had been lost. She whispers, then maybe "We can try again." The words break the last wall between them. Nathaniel exhales, almost collapsing with relief, and steps forward. Carefully, so carefully, he wraps his arms around her. The embrace is not triumphant or fiery, but tender. The kind of hug that feels like home after a long exile. For a long moment, they stand in that dusty barn, surrounded by curious animals and shafts of golden afternoon light. It's not glamorous, not polished, but it is real. Emma rests her head against his shoulder and thinks, maybe this time, he means it. Maybe this time, I won't have to carry the fight alone. Nathaniel holds her tighter, silently vowing that this messy, honest connection is the beginning of a different kind of life, a new partnership, a new love, a new start. Emma's return to Hayes and Grant is nothing short of a quiet revolution. This time, she doesn't sit at the secretary's desk outside Nathaniel's office. Instead, the plaque on her new door reads, Director of Strategic Creative. Within months, campaigns she designs transform the company's reputation, turning rigid corporate pitches into bold, authentic stories that resonate with millions. Clients line up, investors double their commitments, and even the once skeptical board members whisper about her genius. Nathaniel watches with pride, but not the possessive kind. He steps back, letting Emma shine, learning that real leadership is about lifting others rather than controlling them. When skeptics question her unorthodox ideas, Nathaniel is the first to speak up, defending her with the conviction he once lacked. True to his promise, silence never betrays her again. Their partnership deepens beyond the office. Late nights at work turn into shared dinners, sometimes takeout eaten off blueprints, sometimes home-cooked meals that end with Emma teasing Nathaniel for burning the garlic bread. What once felt like a battlefield now feels like a shared journey. One evening, after a particularly successful presentation that secured a $40 million deal, Nathaniel takes Emma to a quiet rooftop overlooking the Chicago skyline. He's rehearsed 100 polished speeches, but when the moment comes, nerves undo him. As he pulls out the ring, it slips from his hand, bouncing once before landing perilously close to a drain. Emma gasps, then bursts out laughing as Nathaniel scrambles in his suit, muttering under his breath. "Smooth move, Mr. Hayes," she teases, wiping tears of laughter from her cheeks, finally retrieving the ring, his face flushed. Nathaniel kneels not with the confidence of a CEO, but with the vulnerability of a man who knows what it means to lose and nearly lose again. "Emma Carter," he says softly, "you are the chaos that saved me. Will you marry me?" Her laughter fades into a smile that glows brighter than the city lights. "Yes," she whispers, before adding with a grin, "but only if you promise not to drop the ring at the altar." Their wedding months later is not the spectacle Margaret once imagined. Instead, it's a small gathering in a sunlit garden, filled with friends, a few close colleagues, and rescued animals Emma insisted on including. The goat chews on the hem of Nathaniel's suit jacket during the vows, and Bentley, the piglet who once tangled with Nathaniel's tie, trots proudly down the aisle with the rings tied around his back. The officiant nearly loses his place when the goat sneezes loudly, and Emma trips on her dress only to be caught by Nathaniel earning laughter from the guests. But none of it matters. In fact, it's perfect, because it's real, messy, and alive. When they exchange vows, they keep them simple. Nathaniel promises never to hide behind silence again. Emma promises to keep bringing color into his ordered world. And together, they promise to face the chaos hand in hand. As they walk back down the aisle, petals floating through the air, Emma looks at Nathaniel and whispers, "You know, sometimes, the right kind of chaos is exactly what a cold world needs to feel alive again." Nathaniel squeezes her hand, smiling, "And I'm never letting go of mine." And that, dear listeners, is the story of Emma Carter and Nathaniel Hayes, a secretary who was never meant to last more than a week, and a CEO who thought he could survive alone. Together, they discovered that strength isn't about building walls. Sometimes, It's about daring to let someone break them down. So, what do you think of Emma and Nathaniel's journey? Did you see yourself in their struggles, their laughter, their fragile but brave love? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Your voice helps keep stories like this alive. Until next time, remember sometimes, the chaos we fear is the very thing that makes life worth living. At its heart, Emma and Nathaniel's story is not only about love, it's about courage, dignity, and the willingness to change. Nathaniel spent years hiding behind walls of control, convinced that strength meant silence and perfection. Emma, with her honesty and imperfections, revealed that true strength lies in vulnerability, in daring to be seen, flaws and all. For many of us, especially as we grow older, it becomes easier to retreat into habits, routines, or even pride. We may fear rejection or feel it's too late to take risks. But this story reminds us that it is never too late to open the door to connection, to admit our mistakes, and to let people in. Emma chose dignity over compromise, and Nathaniel learned that silence can wound more deeply than words. Together, they showed that redemption is possible when humility meets forgiveness. In life, we cannot control every outcome, but we can choose to be present, to defend what matters, and to embrace the chaos of love, friendship, or change. Because sometimes, the very things that disrupt our comfort are the things that finally make us feel alive. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and for listening to Emma and Nathaniel's journey. If their story touched your heart, made you smile, or gave you something to think about, we'd love for you to be part of our community. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might enjoy it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world. It helps us continue bringing you more stories that inspire, heal, and remind us of the beauty of being human.